what's up? Hello. I have to turn the mic a little bit away from my face. What's up? Hi. What are we doing today? Hello. We are talking about the Tal'Dorei campaign setting. What's up, Bing Bong? Because I was going to make a video on it. I recorded myself reacting to it and talking through theories and then lost all of the footage. So I still have all the ideas in my noggin. You won't get to see like a fresh, reaction, but we'll be able to talk through some of the things that I think about the Tal'Dorei campaign guide. And then after this video, we'll go into a bit of critical eyes. So without further ado, oh my gosh, I'm scratching my face and it's turning red because I just have some shit on it. I don't know. What's up? When you post times in the Discord, can you please put them in time zone in the future? Yes, good point. I normally do. And the Discord just added like a new feature that you can just like auto time zone it. I don't know why it didn't. That's a good point. Here, actually, I'm just gonna do it right now. At time 12:30. There we go. Boop. And then and also 11:30. What's up? No, that's a good point. Time 11:30. Boop. There we go. What up? What's up, G Hercup? Is this a pre-stream? Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's going to be a pre-stream with a particular topic. But yeah, pre-stream. Why isn't chat updating on screen? I know why. It's because I don't have the app that runs the on-screen chat open. That would probably be why. There we go. That's open. Everything is all connected. I think. Let me confirm before I get going. Nope, for some reason, it just didn't sign into my broadcaster account. There we go. Now it should be open. Hey, and there's Jonathan Busby. Perfect. Yeah, let's make it happen. Okay. I've got a lot to say about this text, as I'm going to call it. Love this title. Oh, I've got some things to say about the Raven Queen. Oh, don't you worry. I also I was writing up some like bullet point type notes, but then did not finish, so I'm actually going to take those off. Although, actually, I need to leave them on just to fill out the space. What's up? Okay, so I'm gonna kind of go through it just like as presented in the book, and then we will go back through it a little bit. And I'll pick out the parts that I'm really interested in connecting and talking about, but I'll just give the big highlights first. So if you don't know what the Tal'Dorei campaign setting is, boom, it's this. It was released basically around the time of where we are currently in Critical Role, at least where I am in Critical Role, in Critical Eyes. And it was before the Vecna stuff had really like kicked off in earnest. But after, all the Chroma Conclave and all that sort of stuff. So it has like a very interesting tone to it that I was not expecting for a campaign setting. And I will argue in this stream, that it is purposefully written within fiction authorship in mind. Like, it is being explicitly written from an in-world author fiction point of view. And not only that, but it is being written by multiple in-fiction authors that are frequently contradicting and disagreeing with each other. And I don't think those contradictions are bad, to be very clear. I think they're really cool. And I think that they speak to a deeper layer of culture within Tal'Dorei and within the surrounding polities. So I'm excited to talk about it. And there's some just cosmological stuff that's very interesting. So first of all, nice heartfelt introduction from Matthew Mercer. And something that I want to highlight is within these pages lie the tools to create, introduce, and run your own adventures within the continent of Tal'Dorei, either before, during, or after the adventures of Vox Machina. You will learn about the history of the realm, the figures who guide it, and the powers which may invoke and alter the paths of the next wave of heroes you summon within. I offer you the necessary materials to create legends, and I hope you enjoy bringing them to life. So that is the purpose of this book. The purpose of the book is to be like a way to give DMs tools to run their stories in Tal'Dorei. So from that, just off rip, I was not necessarily expecting everything to be like 100% accurate to the events that we have seen unfold. I was already not expecting that because there's some simplifications that need to happen there in order to, I think, accomplish that goal. However, while I think there were simplifications towards this goal, I also think they were done in a very cool and interesting way. So we will start off with the myth of Exandria, and to be very clear about where this is all coming from, the following information outlines what is known within scholarly circles and historical archives, kept by the monks of the Cobalt Lyceum or the historians of the Alabaster Lyceum. The monks of the Cobalt Soul or the historians of the Alabaster Lyceum. The learned student may begin their journey with seeds of this history to explore, while others uncover its truths as they wander along their path. Regardless, we all come from somewhere, and to learn from history is to write a better destiny. So, number one, this is like explicit confirmation that this is in fiction authored. Like the authorship of at least some of this information of this text is explicitly in fiction. It is explicitly from these sources. Now, that's also just something that's like easy to say, but I also think that the text is written with that in mind, which is a lot harder. Like anyone can just like say this and then just, give like broad hand of God information. But I think that this factor was actually kept in mind during the writing of it. I think in fiction authorship gives a lot more freedom to DMs. If you don't like a piece of lore, you just say that's what they think. 1,000,000%. Yeah. And so beyond just this, we then have the myth of Exandria. Life ever seeks to understand its inception. Every civilization has its own interpretation of where its story began. Even within the world of Exandria, different cultures have creation myths that eventually converge with history, but there's no known definitive story. So it's being very clear and upfront that like this is like one version of the story. And again, easy to say that, harder to represent it in the text, and I think they did a good job of it. It is widely accepted as the true record of the world's origin. The myth of the founding is the interpretation held and embraced within most of Tal'Dorei, as well as the vast lands of Exandria. So it is saying that this is the predominant creation myth, but that it is just one creation myth. And the things that I really want to highlight within what I will call the Vasselheim myth, is a few things. First of all, the of creation primordial, the gods came from beyond the ether, new and formless. So this is before anything really exists, and the gods are originating from somewhere else. they are explicitly strangers in a strange land, which was very interesting to me. And it honestly doesn't have a whole lot to do with the rest of my theorizing, but I think it's very cool. Like, it's a very interesting little piece of lore about the gods, is that they are not originally from here. They come from elsewhere, which is even more interesting when we get into the betrayer gods and exactly what the betrayer gods actually want. So the divine hands formed the first children, the elves, created with the physical grace reflecting the gods' own divinity to walk the verdant lands and know the music of the blue skies. Then the dwarves, then humans. I'm already going to point out this whole elvish creation myth is distinct and separate from a different elvish creation myth that we get later during the Archheart. Right here, during the description of the god, the Archheart, we have where is it? Here it is. The founding in guardian over spheres of spring, beauty, and the arts. The Archfey is the patron of arcane magic and the Fae. The founding inspired them to wander the twisted lands, seeding them with the first arcane magics and raising the most ancient forest. It was by the Archheart's hands that the first elves wandered from the Feywild. And for this reason, they are considered the mother and father of all elves. Now, there's a way to harmonize those accounts. You can just say, oh, the elves during this, in this account, the elves were created in the Feywild, and then the Archheart led them out of the Feywild to wander the verdant lands and know the music of the blue skies, right? Like, you can kind of insert these accounts together, and like, they don't contradict necessarily, but I think the most natural reading of both of them does not represent the same events. So already, I would say we have at least a very soft contradiction in terms of the origin of the elves. Because Feywild and Shadowfell and any other plane of existence are not mentioned anywhere in these myths. In the founding myth. The only time it is mentioned is later. We'll get there. But it just says that they saw creation primordial, and they looked upon the roiling realm, and they decided to create there, right? There's no mention of, like, separate realms that they're creating the dwarves and the elves in, right? The implication here is that the elves and the dwarves and the humans are all being created in the material realm. Whereas during the Archheart, we get a little bit of a different story. So already, whoever's writing, I think, the divine profiles of the Archheart is pulling on a slightly different founding myth than the person that was writing this section about the founding. So after that, we have the next thing I wanted to touch on was that the gods' gift, and this is before the gods are separate, by the way. This is before there are betrayer gods and prime deities. These are all Protean creators. They have not had any beef yet. They're just chilling. And before that, they say the gods gave to them gifts, lending their own power to their children to create and shape the world around them. These were the first divine magics. Thus, the various people began to learn how to bend the angry earth to their will, to temper the fires that burst through, to tame the floods that threatened their abundance, and to foster seedling into fruit and beast into meal. This is elemental magic. Like, let's not get it twisted. This is druid magic. This is Ashari magic, right? And it is being described and characterized as divine, which I think is a little bit interesting, especially given how people have warned Keyleth about using her magic within the bounds of Vasselheim, and how Vasselheim seems uncomfortable with asking the Ashari for help, or even using the druids that they actually have within the walls, right? They seem uncomfortable with this idea of teleportation, of natural teleportation, natural magics, even though in the founding, the first divine magics are elemental in nature. Interesting. We'll get back to that. I don't think people have ever questioned Keyleth's magics. They very explicitly like talk about her teleportation, right? She has to like hide her teleportation. So like when they are teleporting into Melora's area of Vasselheim, it's like they kind of have to like hide it. They have to be sneaky and stealthy about it because people look down on even like natural elemental magic, like her doing tree stride, or maybe it's not tree stride, maybe it's transport via plants. Either one. There is an aspect of her having to hide it. Now, obviously, they talk much more about like Tiberius and him having to like be low key about his magic when he first arrives, but they do talk about Keyleth as well. I thought that was the group misunderstanding the warnings against the arcane, but I could be wrong. It's possible. The question is that them doing misunderstanding the directions the city has, or is that on the city? I can't actually remember. I think it's on the city. But even so, again, the council that we just saw, that it is like composed of Vord and all of the other Vasselheim leaders that Vox Machina met with before they went to the Titan in the very recent episodes, were actively uncomfortable with the idea of asking the Ashari for help, of asking the Pyra for help, right? So regardless of, it necessarily how they've interacted with Keyleth, they were actively uncomfortable with the idea of involving the Pyra and the Druids and all that. So even if there's not like as explicit of a ban and a separation, it is still there. In a way that, clearly it wasn't in the beginning. Definitely feels like there's a layer distinction between proper divine magic and independent divine magic that seems like it wasn't present initially. Oh, and we'll get even further into it. But yeah, I think that there is like a bit of a difference now in what we consider divine magic. Yeah. And next, the realm did not wish to be tamed. We have another bit here about the primordial titans. The gods watched their children, their joy were largely dashed against the broken rocks. Here's another weird bit. Demonic entities spilled from the umbra of the abyss to feast on the carnage, called forth by the violence and released to pick the carrion clean. Importantly, very importantly, this is happening. The demonic entities spilling from the umbra of the abyss. This is happening before there is a split between betrayer gods and prime gods. This is before that. And we know that because directly after, some gods were so full of grief and anger they wished to abandon this world for another. Also interesting, we'll come back to that. Trying to convince their divine kindred to join the primordials in reclaiming the realm for chaos so they could move on to start anew. Other creators wished to remain and subdue these native primordials to tame the land. This caused a divide among the gods. Some left the family of the creators to give into madness, joining their song and sword to that of chaos and destruction, taking and twisting their children in the image of their intent. Celestial sentinels locked into war with the chaotic force of the abyss fell to hate and tyranny, forging the hells under a fallen angel, now claiming lordship. Okay, so several things with this paragraph. Number one, we're not entirely clear on exactly which gods are falling into which camp. They don't give us any specifics. So there are, as I see it, three camps. There are the creators that wished to remain and subdue the native primordials. Those are going to go on to become the prime deities. And then there are some that left the family and became the devils, right? So this is, although it's actually even less clear than that. So it's just some basically went onto the side of Chaos and the Titans. Then we also have separately Celestial Sentinels that became the devils in the hells. And then there are also a fourth group that just wanted to move on and start anew. It is not totally clear how all four of these groups overlap, right? So some of them could have wanted to leave, but maybe when it came down to it, they decided to stay on the side of the prime deities. Some could have wanted to leave and then fell into the hells to become the devils. But then there are also clearly other sort of betrayer god type entities that are not devils and are not demons or anything like that. So there are multiple different subdivides going on right now amongst the gods. And importantly, all of this subdivision happened after the Abyss. Why is that important? That is important because if we go into the Betrayer God wikis, the Betrayer God profiles, we get this information about the Chained Oblivion. In its endless imprisonment, it dreams the infinite depths of the abyss into reality, along with all its demonic legions. The prime deities had thought it locked away during the founding until it nearly returned to ruin the world during the conflicts of the Calamity. What? I'll give a bit of a spoiler for the rest of the founding. Never at any point does the founding make mention of locking away the Chained Oblivion, and it certainly does not do so before all of this split. So how does the Abyss exist back here before we have the First War, mind you? How does the Abyss exist, and yet it is also dreamed into existence by the Chained Oblivion, who is one of the Betrayer gods? It's not listing the Chained Oblivion as a primordial of some kind. It is listing him as a Betrayer god, assumingly he was one of the Protean creators, who, at the point that we see the Abyss, are not separated. The Protean creators, when the Abyss is introduced, are all still one large group. So either there's some timeline fuckery going on here, very possible, or there is just direct contradiction in terms of like creation accounts and the abysses. One of the other interesting things about the founding, about this entire text right here, is that it never describes the creation of exterior planes. It only describes the creation of the hells here, but it never describes the creation of like god or prime deity planes. Sorry, the word terminology is a bit confusing. It describes them creating prison planes at the end here, right? So the good children drove away their traitorous kin, banished the betrayer gods to their own prison-like planes, and ultimately destroyed the primordials. But they never mention the creation of Feywild, of Shadowfell, or any of the higher planes, right? At this point, there are the material plane, and then there are the prison planes for the betrayer gods. Those are like the two things that exist. But at this point, we do not have any example of like any exterior planes existing. So the Abyss was ostensibly not created. The Abyss was just there within the primordial creation, or creation primordial, I should say. And it was either just worked into Creation Primordial, or it was the only separate plane besides Creation Primordial, and then the prison planes were created. It's very unclear. I would call it contradictory. But it is a very interesting look at the person that is writing this account of the founding clearly views the Abyss as just like a naturally occurring phenomena, and the demons therein as just a naturally occurring phenomena. Whereas once we get to the divine profiles, we get this totally separate legend of the chained oblivion dreaming the Abyss into existence, even though that doesn't match the timeline presented during the founding. Yeah. The third group I don't interpret as any of the gods in that reading. I read that as lesser beings, i.e. solars that became devils. Very possible. That's what I'm saying, is there's a lot of ambiguity into, like, some of the gods might have just left. Some of the gods might have moved on to a different non-prime material plane. Maybe some of the gods abandoned the material plane and moved on to start anew. Maybe they went to somewhere like the Feywild. Maybe some of the Protean creators were the Archfey. Maybe because this is so unclear, it's not clear that all of the gods that want to abandon the world eventually become the betrayer gods. That's not a one-to-one. Maybe some of them did, because it says others of the creators wish to remain and subdue, and there's a divide here, and some of them left the family of the creators to turn into madness. But some of them stayed around. Some of them may have moved on. Who knows? This is all a very chaotic time. There's not strict delineations. So, maybe the Archfey aren't the betrayer gods. Maybe they're a whole third category, and they are from the Protean creators, but are neither betrayer nor prime. They didn't stick around to have all this beef. They didn't stick around to deal with the primordials. They went somewhere else. Because all of the gods are originally from somewhere else, according to this. So these ones just kept moving. They just kept going. They just didn't stop. This is a spicy stream name. Oh, we'll get to the stream name. I do remember watching a video by Esper the Bard about the Raven Queen's Forgotten Realms lore. She constantly steals domains from other gods, strings of fate from Lolth, and how hypocritical she is as. We'll get there. Classically, the Abyss has infinite layers, or at least to make a count. Could be that CO dreaming the Abyss into existence is it adding more and more layers. It could be. I don't think that's the most natural reading of dreamed into existence. Again, these things can all be harmonized if we want to. But I think it is maybe not necessarily more interesting. I don't know if it's more or less interesting necessarily. But I would say that there is a decent argument to be made that these just contradict. Despite the fact that they can be harmonized, the most natural readings of both of them are contradictory. In one, the Abyss pre-exists any sort of divide, and in one, a betrayer god dreams it into existence during his imprisonment, which comes well after it exists within the founding myth. Again, you know, and I even said during the original video that I recorded for this, I said, you know, there's another harmonization possible where, you know, maybe the Chained Oblivion is partially like a god of time in some ways. And so once he dreamed the Abyss into existence, it had sort of always existed. Like, he dreamed it into existence after he was imprisoned, but once he had dreamed it, it had always existed, even into the past before he was imprisoned. That's like, there's some harmonization attempts we can do, but I think that, again, the most natural reading does not lend itself to that. In classic D&D lore, the Chained Oblivion is not a sentient god like the others, but more an aberration. Yeah. So next we have, and we also have the original kind of establishment of Vasselheim. Woo! Yay, Vasselheim. Next we have the Age of Arcanum, and this is where I want to start talking about the prime deities and like their kind of attitude within this text. It's interesting. It's very weird. And I would argue kind of nonsensical. And it leads me to believe that this is just not correct. Like, it leads me to believe that no one really knows what happened during the founding or the Age of Arcanum, and these are just the best recreations because the prime deities act strangely within these accounts. So, what happens first? Some of the peoples grew arrogant, seeing their arcane gifts as proof the gods held no sway over their fate. A bit of a strange idea, given, like, that you still think of them as gifts. Gifts from who? The gods, presumably. But then they kind of seem to be correct in that arrogance. Like, they could become as powerful as the gods themselves. As such, many began to shun faith for their own pursuits. Though this hurt and surprised the prime deities, they understood the willfulness of their creation and endured out of love and hope for redemption. Yes, and Set Theshalo, you hit the nail on the head with a wider point that I want to make about this text. This is absolutely prime aligned apologetics. This is, I think that they kind of bend over backwards to make the prime gods not inexorably, but just like totally good guys. They never talk about them badly. Even when they, like, don't really help or do anything, like, a lot of times they will characterize their inaction as, like, some sort of positive thing. But the prime gods, the real answer is that they just don't really do much. That's the thing that we're gonna see here, is they just don't do a whole lot. And yet it's always come back to them being, like, the good guys. So it's very strange. We'll get there. So great kingdoms sprung up, blah 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 blah, and we get to is calling them gifts a contradiction? I interpret it as editorializing from a modern author. It almost certainly is editorializing. Almost certainly. We don't know what exactly how the people interpreted that. But I think it is absolutely, I think all of this is editorialized. To be super duper clear, I think all of this is editorialized. And that's like kind of one of my underlying points. It is not that the people in the past actually thought these things. It is the fact that a modern editor is displaying the past in these ways, right? And so that brings me into the Raven Queen. And I'm going to bring this up, and then we'll kind of wrap back to the Raven Queen. She's going to kind of be my capstone point. But this is where we actually get the Raven Queen. One mortal mage, her name either lost or struck from history, crafted now forbidden rites to challenge the god of death, felling him and taking his place among the pantheon. What? All at once? What? Just all at once. We were just like, boop, you're gone. So, and notice, not only did she just take his place amongst the pantheon. It's not just like she demoted him, but she actively felled him, ostensibly killed him, and took the place. We'll get to that. I just put a pin in it. Put a pin in it. Because we will come back to that. Then we get one powerful archmage, Vespin Chloros, was inspired by this display. Driven by his hunger, he sought the guidance and power of the banished gods, rending open the gates of their prisons and releasing the betrayers into the mortal world. Okay. Vespin Chloros, it's never made clear, but I assume is Vecna. Again, not made clear. They never talk about Vecna in this entire text. Probably copyright reasons for that. So it's not confirmed that Vespin is definitely Vecna, but I am going to operate as though that is the case. Because they share a lot of similarities, and I very much understand why they would not include the name Vecna in this text. In the Forgotten Realms, Mistra has to allow you to cast magic, but I'm not sure that's true in Exandria. So is arcane magic even a gift at all? Yes, actually. It is actually, I mean, well, according to this text, the arcane magic is a gift. We will see that. And I actually kind of skipped it. We didn't see that. So this is still during the founding, actually, before the Age of Arcanum. The remaining creators wishing to salvage their home, their creations, and their realized selves were forced to take up arms and learn new methods of protection to defend the faithful among their creations. These gods are referred to as the prime deities. They organized their followers and taught them how to draw from the very powers of creation to build, change, and destroy, all for themselves and without the aid of divine power. Creation learned to defend itself through practices such as alchemy or by autonomously bending the very fabrics of existence, though not on the scale of the gods' work. This gift was the knowledge of the first arcane magics. So, this is a very interesting distinction between what the arcane magics even are. They are a gift. They are a gift from the gods, and the knowledge, explicitly, the knowledge of arcane magics was given by the prime deities, not the betrayer gods. The prime deities are the ones that gave the gift of knowledge of arcane magics. The difference is that they are not reliant on divine power, which is interesting. So it implies that divine magic and elemental magic is, I would say, an implication here, has a reliance on divine power to function. Whereas arcane magic, still given by the gods, still a gift of knowledge from the gods, the prime gods, but it does not rely fundamentally on divine power to operate. So that seems to be the entire distinction between the two. Everything up until now, all of the elemental magic, that is all reliant on a divine connection, whereas arcane magic is not. Interesting. Is it a gift to teach your children how to survive on your own? Well, that's a whole other question. So, all that Vespin does here is rend open the gates of their prisons and release the betrayers into the mortal world. So that is what Vespin does. Is during the first war, they locked up all the betrayer gods in separate prison planes. And then Vespin goes and opens those prison planes. Bing, bang, boom. We don't actually talk about what happened to the primordials, although, it's pretty clear what happened to them within actual Exandria, within the actual story. But that's like what Vespin does. He goes in, he opens up the prison planes. So already the gods have set up prison planes that mortals are able to just like access and crack open. So we now do a little bit of beef. The hells and the abyss begin to push their way into creation. They are now unbanished. Blah blah blah. So, let me remind myself. Oh yeah, Vasselheim gets reduced to rubble. Interesting. And it is only saved by the intervention of the gods. The prime deities descended to trade blow with their former brethren. The battle between divinity and mortal kind, heroes and demons, raged ceaselessly for 20 days and nights until the dark forces, their surprise attack thwarted, were forced to retreat. Number one, 20 days and 20 seems to be some manner of divine numerology here. Based on some other things that we find later in the text, I don't think it was literally 20 days and 20 nights. I think that 20 is a divine number. And like I said, we'll get to that. I don't know why 20 is a divine number. It's not clear. But there are some other indications to that fact later on in the text. But evil was repulsed momentarily, but with the revelation of such a terrible foe, a dangerous arcane arms race began. Trust was shattered indefinitely. If mortals could fall under the sway of the betrayer gods, who was an ally? If ruin like this could be unleashed under the watchful eyes of divinity, how were they relevant? So this is very interesting because the divine prime gods were just like not involved. They watched everything happen. They watched Vespin open the gates. They watched Gordranas begin to be created and frankly just did nothing about it. They did nothing. They didn't even do anything about the Raven Queen. Like, just totally, totally usurping one of their members. They seem to have done actively nothing during the Age of Arcanum until Vasselheim is nearly reduced to rubble. Once Vasselheim gets reduced to rubble, now the prime deities get involved. Number one, very Vasselheim oriented story, right? The prime gods don't care about anything until Vasselheim is being threatened, and now suddenly they care and they intervene. I think there is distinct Vasselheim exceptionalism going on in this text in a few ways, but especially this. Like, they do all sorts of stuff before the prime gods get involved. But once they start attacking Vasselheim, that's when the prime deities got to come down. So these questions at the end here, if ruin like this could be unleashed under the watchful eyes of divinity, how were they relevant? Frankly, decent question. Like, not a bad question to ask when they totally ignored everything that was going on until it showed up on Vasselheim's door. I don't think this is a crazy thing to think. So, very interesting. Also, D20, divine 20, 20's divine because of dice, did not connect that even slightly. You're almost certainly correct. You're almost certainly correct. So that's funny. Religion never has favorite child issues. No, never. And we definitely don't get even more of that here. Not trusting any but themselves, the self-interested and singular humans beat their instruments of celebration into instruments of incredible power, artifacts that could be wielded by singular heroes. So this is where I really get some of the bias of the text, right? Earlier, at the beginning of the Age of Arcanum, we have that the peoples grew arrogant, right? The peoples are arrogant. The prime deities are loving and hopeful for redemption, even though they don't do anything to facilitate said redemption. They don't do anything to guide their flock. They just say, we're so hopeful that they'll come back and repent. And then the self-interested and singular humans beat their instruments of celebration into instruments of incredible power. Bitch! What do you mean, the self-interested humans? The gods just let the betrayer gods run wild. They're letting them do whatever they want. The only thing they did was protect Vasselheim. Nothing in between Vasselheim and fucking Gordranas got protected, no. None of that deserved the gods' intervention. Once we get to Vasselheim, that's when we can count on the gods' intervention. Like, why wouldn't humans fucking try to look out for themselves? The gods clearly aren't. They're looking out for Vasselheim, and that's kind of fucking it. So, the dwarves' fascination with rock and earth turned into isolation as they burrowed further into the mountains. Elves used their understanding of creation's beauty and intricacies to weave spells of unimaginable destructive force, blah, blah, blah. For the first time since the primordials, the focus of magic was warfare. The gods themselves agreed to join their children on the field of battle, descending from the heavens to take up arms once more for the war now referred to as the Calamity. Interesting point here. The gods themselves agreed to join, implying that the mortals had to, like, ask them. They didn't just decide to do it. The mortals were like, despite the fact that right up here, the self-interested and singular humans did this, we then get an explicit implication that people were actively entreating the gods, please help. And they finally agreed and kickstarted the Calamity. Now, the Calamity is, I think, delightfully vague. There is very, very little that is displayed about what actually happened during the Calamity, and I think that's cool. I think that's very appropriate for this big world-shaking war. So, we basically get through it and say, so great was the loss of life during the war that historians believe no more than a third of Exandria's population survived, leaving the only remaining bastion of civilization, the Dawn City itself, Vasselheim. Oh man, they even make sure to include its title, right? I don't feel crazy saying that this text has a Vasselheim bias. They made sure to include its special little title. And also, a third of the population survived. Was a third of it in Vasselheim? Seems there was no other bastions of civilization, even though a third's not a lot, don't get me wrong. A third is a lot of people dying. 2/3 of the world dying is a lot. But the only bastion of civilization? Okay, Vasselheim, for sure. The gods really have fuck you got mine energy? A little bit. And then we have the betrayer gods were banished once more to their realms of deception and hate, but the threat of their return weighed heavily on the world, as it fucking should have. The prime deities felt their involvement in mortal conflict was to blame for the cataclysmic damage inflicted upon Exandria. Okay, so like why? Why did they think that? Like, they're like, oh, their involvement in the mortal conflict is why there's all this damage? I mean, like, kind of, but it's a really weird way to think about the situation, right? It's like, oh man, like, I'm trying to think of a good example. It's like, you know, it's almost like, oh, I was like I ate a bunch of ice cream, and then I ran on the treadmill and threw it all up because, I just eaten a pint of ice cream, and I throw it all up after running on the treadmill. I should not run on the treadmill anymore, right? It's not that your involvement caused your involvement did literally cause it, but it's only because the betrayer gods broke out of their prison and mortals broke them out of their prison while you were, I don't even know what the fuck the prime gods were doing. Nothing. So it's not that. It's a lack of foresight and forethought, not involvement. The problem is not that you got involved, it's that you got involved too late. Right? It's crazy. This mindset of our involvement. And this is what we get from Vord as well. Vord says the exact same thing, which is why I think this is almost certainly kind of a core part of the theology of the Vasselheim creation myth, is this idea of the gods thought, oh my God, the gods are so cool. The prime gods are so awesome. They thought, hey, it's our fault. Humans, it's not your fault. It's not the betrayer god's fault. It's our fault. We'll take it onto ourselves. Oh my God, they're such martyrs. They're so awesome. And it's no, they're fucking idiots. It's so interesting to me because this perspective in bending over backwards to make the prime deities the good guys make them look stupid, in my opinion, at least. And hey, maybe there's a bit of a pattern in how Vasselheim acts today. Hey, maybe I'm not so surprised that a Vasselheim author would, lean towards that, of righteous morality past the point of sanity. If the world had 10 million people pre-calamity, there would be 3 million at the end, and Vasselheim doesn't seem like a city of 3 million, and 10 million is a small population for the globe. Absolutely. Vasselheim was not the only remaining bastion. Come on. And I mean, that's not even to consider the fact that we know Ank'Harel was founded pre-calamity, right? Vasselheim was dealing with people during the Age of Arcanum. They were dealing with Eyepatch and Thordak. Although Thordak, I think, was actually after Calamity. But they were dealing with Eyepatch, right? So, we know that there was civilization on Marquette that stuck around at some level. So it's definitely a little bit of a Vasselheim-oriented text for multiple reasons. From the perspective of the author, Vasselheim was the only civilization worth counting. Yeah, no, I think you're almost certainly correct. Which would make sense in story time, since we can't have the gods Deus Ex Machining all the party's problems away, but eons ago doesn't have that meta constraint. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Ank'Harel is only 400 years old, IIRC, but there was civilization on Marquette. Fair enough. Yeah, maybe Ank'Harel itself wasn't around, but there was civilization on Marquette that was dealing with the necromantic underground, Eyepatch, all that. Yeah. I assume the meta origin of that is so the gods have consistent characterization in doing nothing, but we also have the divine gate as a meta excuse, so maybe they really are just dicks. It's interesting, right? Because this goes on to say, right, the betrayer gods were banished, the prime deities felt that their involvement in the moral conflict was to blame, they knew that while the divine gateways were left open, the prison planes that held the banished betrayers would remain imperfect and temporary. Oh boy, will we get to that, because I have thoughts about that. But here's where we have the establishment of the divine gate. In hopes of ensuring that such ruin will not befall Exandria again, they left their children to fend for themselves within and beyond the walls of Vasselheim. Again, only talking about Vasselheim. The prime deities returned to their own realms. This is the first mention that we get of the prime deities having their own realms. At no point before this was the creation of divine realms ever mentioned. and I checked. The best that we have is this text right here. The gods themselves agreed to join their children in the field of battle, descending from the heavens to take up arms once more for the war now referred to as the calamity. I truly think and I don't want to give Matt too much credit here. I don't know how much of this was purposeful, how much of this is unconscious, how much of it was accidental. I don't know. But the way that I read this is as each of these headers is penned by a different author. So the founding is penned by a different author than the Age of Arcanum, which is by a different author than the Calamity. Because the author that is penning the Calamity seems to have a pre-existing notion of the higher planes, right? It just says that they returned to their own realms. Again, implying that their realms pre-existed this point. Clearly, when the history of the Calamity was penned, there was an existing belief of the divine realms that was not present during the penning of the founding or the Age of Arcanum. The two authors that penned these verses, these segments, did not have a concept, at least that they display, of prime deity divine realms. They just didn't exist. And so I think we have this really interesting example of, as time goes on, we are seeing beliefs start to generate outside of these works, right? These works are starting to incorporate new beliefs into their system that did not exist when the previous books were written, right? It's so interesting, I think. I think it's so interesting. Because again, we never have, and this is to a lesser extent, or maybe a lesser importance, but the Archart's biography right here, the Archart's divine profile, this is the very first time the Feywild is mentioned. It is never mentioned before right now in the Archart. We have gotten through the entire history of Tal'Dorei and never mentioned the Archart. You know what else is never mentioned? The elemental planes, right? So this is a collection of writings that does not represent the entirety of belief, right? This myth of Exandria that we're getting is a stripped down version of the actual beliefs of people. And we can kind of confirm that, I would say, by the fact that new theology that is never pre-established is just introduced. Not even introduced, is just referenced, right? It is just referenced to some exterior theology to the text that is never, displayed within the actual text. So I think it's very easy to say that this is not a cohesive explanation or history of what's going on here, and that these authors seem to have different theological and historical beliefs. They're generally writing about the same things. They're generally on the same page, but they very actively have some different beliefs, which is very interesting. Like, the author of the founding characterizes the Protean, or not the Protean creators, but the prime deities as very involved, right? They're teaching mortals magic, they're involved with them, they're doing the war, they're locking away the gods. The Age of Arcanum author has much more distance between the gods, but also this very pro-prime deity bias, this very pro-Vasselheim bias, I would say. And I would even potentially argue that there might have been some insertion into the text by the Age of Arcanum author. I think it is very possible that creation learned to defend itself through practices such as alchemy or by autonomously bending the very fabrics of existence, though not on the scale of the gods' works, right? This section right here actually kind of works as an end of the founding myth. Like, I think if we like actually just read the myth as a whole, this kind of works as an end to the myth. And this text is written, like these last two paragraphs are written much more in the style of the Age of Arcanum author, where he is talking about the arcane magics, like why, and he's bringing in the grand city of Vasselheim. It's talking about how, great the world is going to be. Like, I think this is potentially a bit of an insertion after the fact, right? Which I think would be super cool. Like, I want to be so clear. If it's not obvious, that I think this is so cool. Like, I have negative problem with anything that's going on here. I am purely positive. This is such a cool book. And I love the contradictions within it. Like, I think the contradictions are like what give it spice, because it speaks to the underlying emotions and mentality of the authors. And that, I would say, is almost as interesting, if not more interesting, than the actual ideas being conveyed. What did they prioritize? What did they think was important to include? What did they think was such common knowledge that it wouldn't even need to be explained? Like, that's what I get with this, of the prime deities felt their involvement, blah, 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 blah. The prime deities returning to their own realms. Like, I read that as the author thinking, well, we all know that the prime gods have their own realms. Like, it doesn't even bear mentioning how those came about. We all know. But then we get, hundreds, thousands of years in the future, and now we don't know. We don't know where their original divine realms came from. That's not well known, at least, from what we've seen. So super interesting. What was common knowledge back in the day and what wasn't? Yeah. Can you be a sun god if you step down into the mud and make hard moral decisions? Fucking great question. The author has the same vibe as that Roman emperor that freaked out when he was told that Rome had fallen because he thought it was his pet bird Rome, not the city. Lol. Mega's studying the campaign guide like an Old Testament scholar is sending me. Look, I love biblical scholarship. I watch a ton of religious scholarship channels. I've recommended Religion for Breakfast before. Really incredible stuff. And I think there's a lot of biblical scholarship principles we can apply to this text. Like, I think that, yeah. It's so fun. This begs the question of what the Exandrian Bart Ehrman looks like. Bart Ethan? I think you mean Bart Ehrman. If you're, yeah, Bart Ehrman. There you go. Yeah, I mean, who knows? That's the Queben. The elemental primordials already existed before the gods. Could some other things too? They absolutely could. And I mean, if we're talking about the author of the founding considers, creation primordial, pre-existed the gods. It was just here and the gods found it, and then kicked all of the titans out. And the author of the founding says that the abyss pre-existed, existed before the gods, right? Like, this is the founding author absolutely thinks that things could pre-exist the gods. The primordials, the abyss, sure, some divine planes could pre-exist the gods. Maybe they just moved in. They moved into Exandria in general. So there's no reason they couldn't have moved into divine realms that already were there. We don't get any indication of that, But I think that the author of the founding would 100% agree with you, Licorice Blue. In fact, they might just say, yeah, the divine realms like already pre-existed, like they were just there. Whereas, you know, maybe some others, maybe not so much. Maybe not so much. What I love about this is you are picking apart someone's favorite lore in D&D, and they might eventually see this. Who? Oh no, who is it? I mean, I think this lore is sick. I think the lore in its contradictory nature is so dope. Hopefully whoever's favorite lore it is doesn't get offended. Or doesn't take any negative view of it. I think that it is incredibly interesting. But Mega, there are no contradictions in the text. You just haven't read the right apologetics yet. Look, I was an incredible apologist. I took an apologetics class. I don't know if that's known Mega lore. But I used to be very, very Catholic. And I took an entire apologetics class. I was really good at it. So I can make all of this harmonize. Don't you worry. But I think it's more interesting that it doesn't harmonize, personally. Same thing with a lot of the biblical stuff. It's also really cool for a campaign setting if you read this much into it. That gives DMs so much more hidden flexibility to change the lore. Oh yeah, exactly. There's no need to describe a horse as everyone knows what one looks like, sort of thing. Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. You think gods send out paladins to stop people who are spreading misinformation about them? I mean, someone's going around hunting Ioun followers, so... sort of begs the question, if the gods moved here, where were they before Exandria? And were they always gods, or did they ascend like some mortals have done? I don't know. I don't think that it's going to be a lot of... I don't think it's going to be super relevant to the rest of C1, but I could absolutely see me building on that for C2. Like, the fact that the gods are from elsewhere, they are not from creation primordial, as it's called, leaves like so many interesting questions open about like who they are, what types of beings they are, if it's just supposed to be like poetic, if it's just like a metaphor, or if it is like legitimate history. Because like there's a lot of poetic readings you could do of that, of like, you know, what does it mean for the gods to be strangers? Like, we're all strangers in this land, and that makes the gods more like their creations in that we are both not native, we are not both from here. So that makes them like us. You know, there's definitely some poetic readings there. But it's also like, it might just be like straight up historical. And that would be its own degree of fascinating to think about, like, what existed beyond. Was it like they're all from the Shadowfell? Was it that like the Shadowfell and the Feywild are just these other worlds, and the gods, like, they came from like a fucked up world, like the Shadowfell fell to like, I don't know, nuclear Armageddon or the, you know, the equivalent thereof. It's like the oh Jesus, what am I thinking of? I'm thinking of like the alternate timeline in late game Supernatural, where there's like an apocalypse timeline. And like that could be the Shadowfell. The Shadowfell could have been their original plane that they originated from, and they left it to go to the material, and then the gods that left from there, like, right, the gods that found the material and are like, holy shit, this place sucks. Like, it's got all of these titans that keep killing all of our shit. Let's go somewhere else. And they go to the Feywild. Like, there's some very interesting theory territory for me personally. Yeah. Yeah. I know you can make it harmonize. I've seen you theorize. Oh, I can make it harmonize. The Raven Queen is probably my favorite CR lore, but I won't be offended if you say bad things about my bae. You're allowed to be wrong. I mean, it depends on what you view as bad things. We'll see. Like if you're wanting the Raven Queen to take over the entire setting and be like the last supreme ruler, I think you're going to be very pleased with what I say. But you know, it all depends. This book talks about the creation of the humanoid races, but did the gods make the plants and animals, or did they exist before the gods? Totally unclear. Totally unclear. Yeah, doesn't mention it at all. Yeah. So let's keep going. Let's keep going. The betrayer gods were banished once more into the realms of deception and hate. They knew that while the divine gateways were left open, the prison planes that held the banished betrayers would remain imperfect and temporary. Okay. Now we're going to skip ahead a little bit because I need to show these things side by side, right? So let's just look at the interaction of the prime gods and the betrayer gods and their prison planes, right? Okay. With these newly granted capabilities, the good children drove away their traitorous kin, banished the betrayer gods to their own prison-like planes, and ultimately destroyed the primordials while scattering chaotic elements to their own planes of existence just outside of this one. We have the elemental planes there. Still no Feywild. Then, during the Age of Arcanum, what does it take to undo that? Vespin just kind of wanted to. What does it take to undo that? Vespin just kind of trying. Driven by his hunger, he sought the guidance of the banished gods, rending open the gates of their prison and releasing the betrayers in the mortal world. Okay, so then the gods go, okay, all right, we made you some prison planes, but Vespin was able to just boop, pop them open. We're not going to let that happen again, all right? We are going to put them back in their prison planes. However, we are also going to establish the divine gate, dragging both betrayer and abomination with them and sealing the pathways to the mortal realm behind them with the divine gate. Only in this way could they prevent their corrupted brethren from physically returning to the material plane. I want to read that again. Only in this way could they prevent their corrupted brethren from physically returning to the material plane. Okay. Sadly for the prime deities, this action also carried with it self-imposed sentence of exile. Oh, boo-hoo, the prime deities, they're so cool. They gave up so much for us. They would henceforth never be allowed to visit creation. Okay. But the Raven Queen seemed to manifest just fine over Vax's body, but she's kind of a special case. Regardless, we're gonna skip through some stuff. We're gonna skip through Guessar, the Iron Rule of Drasig, the Scattered War. Even though I have things to say about those, we're gonna skip through a little bit to the Battle of Umbra Hills. Okay? I think. Let me just make sure. I think. Yeah. Okay, the Battle of Umbra Hills. King Trist Drasig, second born of the despotic Warren Drasig, took the throne, envisioning the end of the Scattered War and tasting victory on his lips, etc., etc. Riding the tide of certain victories, Zan and her rebels, allied with the elves of Singorn, pursued Drasig to a valley in the Umbra Hills, but fiends fought in the ranks of their enemy. The spawn of the betrayers had returned to the world from beyond the mountains and spilled into the battlefield like a river of nightmares. The surrounding hills ran dark with blood and ichor. Bodies of humans and demons alike littered the battlefield. Yet against all odds, the hero Zan ended the Drasig bloodline. Okay. Now I want to highlight something for you. You might say, well, that was the spawn of the betrayer gods. That wasn't the betrayer gods themselves. Now, that might be a fair thing to state if the Arcana Panisophical did not disagree with it explicitly. It's right here. All Tal'Dore's greatest mages fought at the Battle of the Umbra Hills. They saw the incursions of demons and devils firsthand and were rightly terrified that the spawn of the Betrayer Gods could ever return to the world. It was clear that the divergence did not wholly prevent supernatural evil from infringing upon the world. So what the fuck is the difference? Why is there the Divine Gate? Why? Why do we have the Divine Gate at all if it doesn't do anything? It literally doesn't do anything. They didn't even... You want to know what the craziest part is? This dude, Trist, didn't even do anything to summon these umbral beasts, right? So the original, the Iron Rule of Drassig, Warren, was originally like a necromancer. He was aligned with the Betrayer Gods, and he got power from them. But where, let me see if I can find exactly where. Cities crumbled underneath, Drastic's shadow tactics were uncouth. They were grouped in the drowned sphere. Oh wait, it wasn't Warren, it was Neminar. That's my bad. Neminar became known as Neminar the Black-Fingered, as dabbling in necromancy left one arm withered and useless. However, his militarizing infernal magics and forbidden rites elevated Drastig's war machine. So Drastig's forces became the perfect weapons of war, their ranks blessed by the unholy touch of the Betrayer God known as the Strife Emperor. So we get like a very normal, I would say, depiction of what it would look like for the gods to influence mortal stuff with the establishment of the Divine Gate, right? The Divine Gate allows the gods to reach through, to grant blessings, maybe mutations, powers, whatever, but they themselves cannot come into the material plane. Just can't happen. Even if they try, right? Because that's all that Vespin had to do. Vespin just had to try. He just had to pop open the gates and they could come out. Now, it does still say that, sure, maybe the actual Betrayer Gods themselves can't manifest. Maybe it's only their spawn that can manifest. However, the Arcana Panisophical seems to have previously understood. Like, before this battle, the understanding seems to have been that even the spawn could not make it through, right? The Arcana Panisophical said that clearly divergence was not enough, and they needed to prepare. So the gods, the prime deities, during the Age of Arcanum, did actively nothing until their creations were either almost killed entirely, or their creations like begged them and asked them to come and help, and then they came and helped. And then do you want to know what they did afterward? Right? So in the founding, they gave all the secrets, and then they kind of just pieced out. Oh, they're waiting for hope and redemption up in their ivory towers. And then humanity begs them, please, please come back. We need your help. And they go, okay, fine. They come back, they help, and then they establish the Divine Gate to say, okay, we're gonna put an end to this divine violence. We're gonna separate out the Betrayer Gods, but oh no, we can't come back either. Shoot. But the spawn of the Betrayers sure as hell can come back. Like, the way that I read this is that the Betrayer Gods wanted an excuse, or sorry, not the Betrayer Gods, the Prime Gods wanted an excuse to never have to come back and help mortals ever again. They wanted an excuse to not need to come back and display their awesome power upon the land. They just want to sit up in their realms and just chill out. They don't want to get involved with humanity personally. It's just, they just have no desire to do so, right? It's not like, and it's not even like, the peoples grew less arrogant. Like, maybe they kind of did, in that some of them asked, but they sure waited a hell of a long time to rescue humanity, and there's not even a discussion point of whether or not humanity, repented or not. It's just that shit got bad enough that eventually the Primes stepped in, even though they could have stepped in at any point before this. So what the fuck are they doing? And then they say, okay, we're just going to take ourselves out of the equation, even though they're like, oh, it was our fault. They're just giving an excuse. They don't care. They don't care. If they cared, maybe they would have stepped in when Vespin tried to ascend, tried to break open the gates. Maybe they would have stepped in at any point during that time. Oh, man. But they didn't. And now they set up a situation where now they can't help and also don't. The betrayer gods send their spawn through all the time, whenever they want. Someone doesn't even have to let them through. Keep that in mind as well. Trist was not Deminar. Trist was not Deminar. He was the other brother. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't brilliant. He doesn't have this necromancy. And yet, the betrayer gods just shipped him a bunch of troops just for shits and gigs. Why didn't the prime deities ever do that? Why aren't the prime deities ever getting involved and sending a bunch of solars and celestials down to help? Why are we having to go against the spawn of the betrayers, and we're not getting the aid of the of the primes? Wasn't Trist before the Divine Gate? No, well after. Well after. So the calamity happens here. This is the Divine Gate. And then we transition into the history of Taldore, which is where the Drassig stuff all happens. So just wild. Think of the Divine Gate as a chain link fence, mouse versus cow. Well, it sure is convenient that no prime mice are finding their way through. Plenty of betrayer mice are finding their way through the fence, but no prime mice. That's so interesting. There are a few words that Matt famously likes. Oh yeah, Umbra. Yeah. Yeah. I think it might also be the mages thought the gods banished all evil, but they only banished the big gods, or maybe prime deities told everyone they sealed away more than they did. I think you're right, Manifollow. I think that, the situation that we ended up getting is, okay, the actual betrayer gods themselves cannot re-enter the Divine Gate. But then we still have the prime deities just slacking off. Right? They're trying to say okay, we established the Divine Gate, and they seemingly told everyone, right? They told all of their followers, hey, you're not going to have to worry about this anymore. I'm not going to say that they lied, because we don't have, explicit evidence that they lied. But it's interesting that they seem to, that the people at the time seemed to have believed something about the Divine Gate that did not end up happening. That was not the case, right? Regardless of what the actual situation is, the people after the calamity believed that this whole idea of the spawn coming back could not happen. The gods gave that impression somehow. And now, not only do we find out that the spawn of evil can return, but the gods have not been sending their spawns back at all. Right? If the spawn of the betrayers could have done all of this, why can't the spawn of the primes? You know? It's crazy. It's crazy. Prime definitely sound like a bunch that preach of protecting what one loves, but leave all their children to die and suffer until it affects them directly. Yeah, a little bit. I thought Mega read the betrayers had prison realms, then the primes needed an extra layer after they escaped. He read directly after Trist. I have been jumping back and forth a little bit. Chronologically, here, let me pull up a drawing. Blah 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 blah. It is the founding. It's the founding. It's Age of Arcanum. Then it is Calamity with the Divine Gate. And then after the Calamity is the Drassig Empire and Bloodline and Wars. So this is the timeline. I am jumping back and forth a little bit in the timeline. So it is a little confusing. Yeah. He's jumping around a bit for comparison. Yes. How did Vespin try to ascend? I thought Raven Queen scattered her ritual. Well, okay, so the whole Vespin ascending thing is something that I am assuming. It is not listed in the text. So right here, it says one powerful archmage, Vespin Chloros, was inspired by the Raven Queen's display of ascension. Driven by his hunger, he sought the guidance and power of the banished gods, rending open the gates of their prison and releasing them into the world. Now, it doesn't actually specify after this that Vespin attempted to ascend. We actually don't get the ultimate fate of Vespin anywhere. It just switches to talking about the city of Gordranas and the betrayer gods as a generic faction acting within this right now. So we actually don't know what ends up happening to Vespin, which I think also is what leads me into thinking that it is almost certainly a Vecna stand-in. So I'm taking the fact that Vespin tried to ascend from the fact that we know that Vecna would have tried to ascend. Now, how did he try to ascend? We have no idea. It could have been a totally separate ritual from the Raven Queens. Yeah. They may not have lied, but they didn't truthed either. Yeah. Prime sound like the Democrats play by the rules and look good and are largely ineffective. Little bit. He wouldn't even necessarily need her ritual. He just needs, she did it, it's possible, I can do it. Yeah, absolutely. Which is what it sounds like with Vespin. It's what it sounds like Vespin, yeah, he was inspired, and then he went on to potentially try maybe something separate himself. So that's kind of the that's one of my big points that I wanted to hit. Is the text is incredibly prime god biased. It is biased towards or in favor of the divine gods, quite a lot of the prime deities. But either the prime deities are not nearly as sweet and kind as the modern theology would like you to believe, or the situation's a lot more complicated than it's being displayed as. And I think it's probably the latter of the two, if I had to guess, especially because we have some clear evidence of not all of the beliefs and the theology being worked into this text. And we also, haven't gotten it all from the horse's mouth outside of this text, so to speak. We have not gotten an indication from any of the prime gods that we've actually been able to speak with in the campaign as to why they established the divine gate, right? No one has ever told us. We've had bigger fish to fry. But we'll get back to this a little bit when we go to the Raven Queen and what I have to say about her. But before that, I want to talk about sea peoples. And specifically, the history of Taldore. Okay, following... Oh, What would you consider the horse's mouth? Would you believe them when they tell you? It's not necessarily that I would believe it as definite truth. It is more that we would get to hear their claims rather than the claims of their followers, right? Because I think it's very, very possible that the prime deities just didn't tell their followers why they established the divine gate. They just didn't inform them. And so their followers and the believers needed to come up with a reason that the gods, didn't establish the divine gate. I think it's the exact same kind of post hoc reasoning that we can see at the beginning of the Age of Arcanum. The people's growing arrogant, right? As the arcane gifts, as proof the gods held no sway over their fate. They actually are correct here, right? This text is portraying these people that they are arrogant and that they are self-centered and that they are wrong. It is implying that this is a bad and incorrect way to be. However, they're not wrong. They're correct. With enough understanding, they can become as powerful as the gods themselves. In fact, debatably more powerful. We'll get to it, but I would argue that the Raven Queen is the strongest entity in creation because she is able to kill a god, something that seemingly the prime gods are not able to do. She is able to kill and supplant a god in its entirety. Not only did she become as powerful as the gods themselves, she became more powerful. So it's not arrogance, it's just truth. And we get this question right here. If ruin like this could be unleashed under the watchful eyes of divinities, how were they relevant? I'll phrase it again. How are they relevant? This is not a situation of arrogant and self-interested humans. This is creations crying out to their creators, please help us. And rather than step in until the final moment, what do humans see? They hear radio silence from the prime gods. And they see the Raven Queen ascend. And they see the empire, not the empire, but the territory of Gordranos expand. Why would they think that the gods are relevant at this point? Why would they think that? They're not. They might as well not be. And so, in my opinion, this text is written from a pro-prime gods bias, and that's why we have some of these insertions here. We have the peoples growing arrogant. We have the peoples being self-interested. We have all of these things framed as negatives to try and justify why the prime deities did not intervene. Though this hurt and surprised the prime deities, they understood the willfulness of their creations and endured out of love and hope for redemption. What does endurance mean? Staying out of it. Right? Like that, we have no other action that they've taken. But the text is trying as hard as it can to paint them in a positive light, even when they did nothing to protect and help their creations. They did nothing until they were asked to descend. In fact, they did already descend once. They descended to Vasselheim, traded blows with their brethren, and then left again. After the evil was repulsed momentarily, they bounced again. And the people had to say, please come back. Please come back. I mean, it's wild. It's wild. And I think it's fascinating to see the lengths that an in-fiction author will go to kind of bend over backwards and justify the actions of the beings that they worship. Yeah. Do you think Exandria would be better or worse if the Divine Gate ceased all intervention from the gods definitively? Like, not even communication with believers? Would Exandria be better off? Almost certainly. If we're also including the fact, or the idea of, if we're also including the idea of, like, partitioning off the elemental planes as well, I think, yeah, absolutely. Like, almost all of the things that are bad about Exandria are coming from outside. They're coming from the exterior, right? The Strife Emperor earlier in the story. There was also, like, demons in Iman was a whole subplot before the start of the campaign. Kavarn was an aberration from outside of the material plane, and he was bearing the horn of Orcus, which is an artifact from outside of the material. Vecna was banished to the Shadowfell, it seems, or was at least resurrected in the Shadowfell, and he was only resurrected because of these, like, Divine Gate permeating magics with the siphons. I would say, like, even the Briarwoods are getting power from off plane. They're getting power from Vecna, who is not currently on the material plane. So yeah, it seems like if the gods just shut off every valve, that pretty much all of the conflicts of the story of Critical Role, or at least of Vox Machina, would not have happened. Like, straight up. We still, we have some of this, like, we have Drassig rising up, the iron rule of Drassig, but he's, like, starting to lose by the time that he dies, and then his son, Neminar, rises to power and is using Betrayer God magic to influence everything. Even the Battle of Umbra Hills is being one-sidedly influenced from outside of the plane. Only the Betrayer Gods are helping out. Like, all in all, the Prime Gods just don't do a whole lot. And so if we compare the two, yeah, it would be better if all of them were blocked. And we couldn't get any help from the Prime Gods, but we also didn't have any interference from the Betrayer Gods. Yeah. I think it would be better. Well, you see, Mega, it is only possible before the Raven Queen ascended. Now it's totally impossible. You shouldn't consider it. Right, of course. Also, the gods get power from the souls of their followers. Raven Queen controls the process of death and where the soul goes. Of course, the primes want her on their side and with their hand on her shoulder. Oh, yeah, we'll dive into the Raven Queen right now. Because, yeah, I think she is the most powerful being in Exandria. Like, straight up. What scares me of the Raven Queen is that, yes, she has done the deal, but her existence is not taboo or anything, and that's seen as worrying. She's now just chilling with the other gods and is venerated. 100%. And right here, the knowing mistress guided the growth of civilization through the Age of Arcanum like sunlight guides the branches of a tree. She was grievously... Oh, wait, no, sorry. This is the knowing mistress. My bad. The matron of ravens, right here. Master over the skein of fate and mistress of winter, the matron of ravens stands as the god of death. Her gaze follows and marks the end of each mortal life, watching over the transition between life and death and ensuring the natural transition is undefiled. Many funerals call upon her blessing, blah, blah, blah. Those who keep to ancient lore believe the matron of ravens was once mortal herself and is the only known mortal to have ascended. Her rise instantly obliterated the previous now forgotten god of death, and the other gods quickly and fearfully destroyed the secrets to the rites of ascension. I want to really, really highlight that, because it does this is actually a lack of contradiction. This is a confirmation of something that you could have implied from previous parts of the text, but that I think was, maybe open to interpretation, but that closes it to interpretation. It is now like these are two separate accountings of what happened. One mortal mage felled him and took his place, right? I think there's maybe some ambiguity in what does felled mean, right? Does it mean weakened? Does it mean imprisoned? Does it mean wounded, right? It wouldn't be that crazy to say that Ioun was felled by the Chained Oblivion, right? It would be a little weird, but it wouldn't be that crazy, right? But it is now I would say entirely confirmed that no, she did not just supplant the god of death. She obliterated and murdered it. It's not that he died or she stepped up. She murdered him. Yeah. And so that makes her, oh my god, so dangerous. Because they could, the other prime deities couldn't even murder the Chained Oblivion. They had to contain him, apparently under Gat Shadow. They had to contain him with trammels. He wounded one of them in the process, right? If they really wanted to, this is an option that is open to the gods. They could kill all of the betrayer gods. They could kill all of them if they wanted to. They could kill, because they know. Number one, they destroyed the secrets of the rites to ascension. Now, we don't exactly know what that means, but my implication would be that the Raven Queen still knows how to do it. Right? Unless they are fucking with her mind, which I don't think they would do. I don't think they would risk doing it. But unless they're actively fucking with her mind and her knowledge, she still knows how to kill gods. And we get description in the story of in Vox Machina of how no one trusts the Raven Queen. None of the other gods really fuck with her. And yeah, of course they don't. If you were previously an untouchable divine being, and then one of your creations stepped up and murdered one of your brothers and sisters, and was like, hello, I'm the god of death now. She's terrifying. Of course you don't trust her. She knows how to do shit that you don't know how to do. Or she's willing to do shit that you're not willing to do. If we're being real, if I'm understanding everything correctly, if all of this is accurate, unless they were able to modify the Raven Queen's memory and her knowledge, she could, in theory, teach Vax how to supplant a god, and Vax could just murder Vecna. Vax could just insta-murder Vecna. If he has ascended, he's a god. She knows how to kill a god. She does not need a trammel to do it. She does not need a trammel to bind them. Right? She was a follower of the previous god of death from everything that we know. And then she murdered his ass. It's scary. She's scary, dude. She's the scariest being in Exandria. She could reset this shit if she wanted to. And she ostensibly just chooses not to because she just doesn't need to, I would say. But it's also kind of extra wild that she doesn't know who Vecna is. That is one thing where I think she's just lying to Vox Machina, straight up. I didn't talk about this too much during the stream after I read this, but after seeing all of this, I don't know how she can't know about Vecna. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Of like, why would she need Vecna? Or why wouldn't she be aware of Vecna? Right? Not only did he try to ascend, as far as we're aware, but he is the person that let the betrayer gods back into the world and triggered the triggered the calamity, right? Like, he's an important figure, regardless of if he's like trying to copy her or not, right? So for her to know so little about him, especially when she's like undeath, and she's like, oh, undead are like abominations. For her to not know about Vecna is actually unbelievable to me. Like, it was already unbelievable when I saw it displayed, and now I straight up do not believe it. I think she's well aware of who and what Vecna is, and has just chosen to lie to Vax. Like, I just think she's speaking untruths to Vax. Yeah. Are we talking about Vespin or Vecna? I'm conflating the two. I am assuming that these are the same, that Vespin and Vecna are the same person because they were not able to use the term Vecna in the book for copyright reasons. Now, I could be wrong. If that's the case, then that's just the case. But I do think that Vecna is Vespin. Yeah. To be fair, we don't know any of the details of the ritual she did. What if she used a trammel of some kind in her ritual? She would have needed to get it from a god, right? So unless the god of death, like, she could have tricked the god of death and gotten him to give her or them to give her a trammel. She could have tricked anyone, really. I mean, it's certainly possible that she used a trammel. That's fair. We don't know exactly how her ritual worked. But the fact that it says that she instantly obliterated it, the other god of death, maybe this is, cultic boasting. Maybe this is like, oh man, Raven Queen's so cool, so dope, get fucked, idiot. Like, maybe it took her a little bit longer in reality. And so she could have maybe used a trammel, that's fair. But either way, really. My question, when ascending, do you need to craft your own domain, Vecna and Lies, or do you need to steal domains from other divine beings? I would say it seems to me that you're allowed to craft them, because there are multiple overlapping deific domains. Like, it's very, very common for domains to overlap. So just like the Stormlord and the Wildmother are both have the domain of Tempest, right? The Crawling King has death and blood. The Cloaked Serpent has trickery and blood. The Ruiner has Tempest and war. The Lord of the Hells has trickery and blood. Like, the Lord of the Hells and the Cloaked Serpent are identical, and they both share blood with the Crawling King. So to me, it doesn't seem like domains need to be like 1-to-1, that they need to like only belong to one deity. We can even see even more of that in here. Like, the Dawnfather and the Everlight are the same. The Lawbearer has knowledge, but that's the same as the Knowing Mistress, who has knowledge and arcana. So it seems like you just get any domains that fit, or crafted. FYI, Vecna and Vespin are different. Are you sure? Are you sure? I mean, like, as far as I am aware, I have nothing to indicate that. Maybe, in like C2 or something, or I guess later in C1, there's a thing there. But I have no reason to think, as of right now, that Vespin and Vecna are different. There's no mention of any equivalent to Vecna in here. And Vespin seems to be the closest. Like, he's inspired by the display of the Raven Queen, which we know is how Vecna was trying to ascend as well. And the Raven Queen calls Vecna like a copycat. So as far as I can tell, they have identical or at least overlapping characteristics. They could be different. I just have no reason to think that they are currently. Like, I know that they cannot use the name Vecna in this book. So I don't know. Unless there's like a later point in one of the Critical Role campaigns where they actively talk about Vecna or Vespin as a separate entity from Vecna. I don't see any indication of that so far. Also, where does he say that he let the betrayers in for the calamity? Vespin let the betrayers in for the calamity. Vespin up here let it in. Yeah. What if, for example, as a follower of the previous guy, she was able to convince him to get his divine spark to build a trammel to use against himself? Super possible, yeah. Something I never considered? Raven Queen would probably never do this, but if she favored a mortal very much, she could just tell them how to ascend and suddenly replace another god. Yeah, Manafalo! That's why she's so fucking scary. Like, no wonder the other gods, like don't like him, or don't like her. No wonder they don't trust her, because yeah, she could just give the knowledge of how to ascend to any mortal she wanted, and not only is it the knowledge of how to ascend, it's the knowledge of how to kill a god. So, yeah, I don't know. A lot of these domains I read as more mechanical cleric D&D domains versus the more narrative in-world domains. Maybe. There's still a lot of overlap. It's still quite a lot of overlap, even if that's the case. Like, some of them are literally identical. So, maybe. But I don't have any indication of, like, what their in-world or in-fiction domains are in that case. Yeah, 100%. I like the theory craft though, especially with the copyright explanation, because I guess it's not impossible, even if you factor in spoilers you aren't privy to yet, but they are distinct enough in lore, I think. As far as I know, they could come out later and say, actually, these were the same, and it wouldn't ruin any established lore. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, yeah. I was sort of under the assumption that Vecna was like kind of like a code name, essentially, or like a special name. Like he was raised Vespin Chloris, but then took on the title of Vecna or the Whispered One later in life. But if they're displayed as distinct, sure, that's fine. It takes away a bit of, like, I guess, meat from some of it, or not even really. It mostly, it just kind of leaves more questions about, like, the Raven Queen and Vecna's relationship. If Vespin and Vecna are separate. But yeah, beyond that, the Raven Queen's still scary as fuck. I don't need Vecna to be Vespin in order to establish that. And I honestly don't even really have a ton of theories about Vecna, even if they are Vespin. So, I don't know. I'm fine with that. It doesn't really matter to me either way. The Primes always had the enemy of our enemy is our friend vibe towards Raven Queen. Yeah. Do you think the Primes should work with or ask the Raven Queen how to kill the betrayers? Maybe for the sake of the mortals and how much suffering is inflicted upon them because of the betrayers? I think it would at least be something to consider. Especially because it seems that the trammels, like, actively weaken them, right? And being able to recover some of that divine essence would be probably pretty good for them. I think they only don't do it because they don't want to, they don't want to, open that door, essentially. It would be a much more chaotic sort of pantheon if they replaced all of the betrayer gods that are currently wielding the power with, mortal people. I think there's also probably a level of elitism of like, yeah, even if it would be better for their creations, they don't want to allow their creations to do that. Like just straight up, they might just like not, they might think that's kind of gross. So, like, would it be better for creation? Like, better than their current strategy. Their current strategy seems to be pretty fucking ass. And like the only ascension that we have on record seems to have been a positive thing. Like the Raven Queen is described as replacing the old God of Death's role. That was a tyrannical position. Although it is worth saying, we don't know literally anything about the previous God of Death. He's not mentioned in the Founding. He's not mentioned in the Age of Arcanum. He is not referenced. So, is it possible that maybe the old God of Death wasn't that tyrannical? That maybe the old God of Death was actually, like, fine? And they just now need to, they now need to portray the Raven Queen, or they now need to portray the old God of Death as a bad guy in order to, like, justify post hoc the Raven Queen ascending, right? Like, to promote stability within the Pantheon. Because, like, if the Raven Queen is still considered a prime deity, and she still has a very active cult in Vasselheim, right? She has to be on the same side as the primes. And if her history is her killing a different prime deity that's like a good guy, that's not like a great way to start things off. So if you're looking at the history and you say, well, this person needs to be good, and we don't know anything about the old God of Death. And by the way, like, I'm not saying that any of this was done with intent or maliciously. If you're a scholar of the Cobalt Soul, or you're a scholar at the Alabaster Lyceum, and you're looking at Vasselheim, and Vasselheim only has cultic worship of prime deities, of prime gods, like, it just bears to reason that the other prime gods were cool with what the Raven Queen did ultimately, even if they were scared of it, right? They were scared of the potential that it created, but if you want to imagine that all of these gods are very powerful and worthy of worship, which you would likely, then they have to have a reason to not have prevented this from happening to the Raven Queen. Right, the reason can't be, well, they didn't notice, so they couldn't stop it before it happened. That's not a great, like, pitch about the gods that you worship. They sound kind of ineffective in that case. And it also can't be, well, yeah, they noticed, but they just allowed one of their own number to be replaced. And they allowed someone that was good to be supplanted by mortals, especially a mortal that was part of the bad cohort during the Age of Arcanum. Like, according to all of the histories that we've read so far, the Raven Queen, or at least her mortal form, Sad Queen, is like a preeminently anti-divine, anti-prime mortal. She is someone that used arcane magic to murder and supplant the god that she followed. And so it's like a bad look to be like, hey, but the story is kind of self-contradictory, right? Either the God of Death was a betrayer god, and the Raven Queen, who we now worship as a prime god, was a follower of a betrayer god. Or the former death god was a prime god, and so she's worshiping the correct side of the pantheon. But she also is taking this massive level of arcane knowledge and supplanting him. So she is a betrayer to her prime deity to her prime overlord, right? Or the former death god was tyrannical, was a bad guy, and was still a prime deity. He was still on the side of everyone else that's worshipped in Vasselheim, right? So, like, the story, like, frankly, just, I think is just self-contradictory. And it is being massaged in any way it can by these later authors to try and come up with some explanation as to how the Raven Queen can still be on the side of the prime deities. But, you know, her ascension could have also happened. It's, I don't think, very explainable. I think it is just like a contradictory situation. Either the Raven Queen is the bad guy, and now there is cultic worship of the bad guy in Vasselheim, or the lines were a little murky, and the former death god was a bad guy, and maybe he was prime, maybe he was not, you know, whatever. We're just not going to think too much about Sad Queen. We're not going to think too much about who she worshipped or what she did. She's ascended now. We don't need to worry about all that. Which seems like the route that they go with, but I don't think it tracks. I think the Raven Queen is the scariest entity in the setting, and I think she is probably following in the footsteps of her previous god. It seems like the god of death was a prime god, I think, but because he probably wasn't on a prison plane, although he could have been. Like, we have no real evidence either way as to whether he was on a prison plane or not. But either way, she's one of the bad guys in the Age of Arcanum, and we now worship her as a prime deity. I think that, like, the former death god was probably someone who rode the middle, like, who was kind of prime, kind of betrayer. I think the delineation was probably less, like, relevant back then. When we see this description of the prison planes that are created, they banished the prison gods to their own prison-like planes and ultimately destroyed the primordials, right? At this point, we only have explicitly the hells and the abyss, but the abyss already got made. Like, the abyss was already here, so it's not one of the prison planes. We don't know of any prison planes other than the hells, right? So I think it is very, very possible that who were the betrayer gods at one point changed. Like, I think who comprises the betrayer gods is not a strict delineation. And we even have the Raven Queen now, one of her domains is still of blood, which, besides her, the only things that have death and blood in the divine pantheon are some of the betrayer gods. The crawling king has blood. The cloaked serpent has blood. You know, and there is certainly some amount of overlap. There's trickery in the prime pantheon as well, but that just goes even more towards my point. I don't think that these delineations are as strict as they, you know, might want to seem nowadays. Yeah. According to Esper's video on her, in the Forgotten Realms, Raven Queen was uncaring and distant until CR's interpretation. Then Raven Queen was reworked to more fit the new popular idea of her. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I like the idea that even bad gods can do/be used for good things, since we already know all about the shit that the good gods and their followers get up to. Yeah. Yeah. You're going to love Calamity. Oh yeah. I'm so stoked for Calamity. I'm so stoked for it. Yeah. But anyway, so that's kind of my piece on the Raven Queen. Is she's terrifying. And like, I think she is ultimately how do I say this? I think she is the god of fate. And I think that everything that is, like, she is not the god of truth or secrets or lies. She is willing to use any tool in her toolkit to accomplish what she wants. She will lie, she will cheat, she will steal, she will kill, she will murder. And she has very personal beefs that she wants to see eradicated, but otherwise is pretty fine to let everything continue as is. And she's scary. I definitely don't trust a word out of her mouth anymore. Yeah. The idea of a good god having a blood domain reminds me of Fear and Hunger old god Grogoroth, my babyface shapeshifter of a human sacrifice, husband to the mother of humanity. Yeah. When it comes to pantheons, I don't really think the goods or the gods see each other as good and evil. They're just doing their thing until their followers start shit. Yeah. And this is all from the perspective of followers. You know, that's kind of what one of the things I was talking about earlier, of like, the gods themselves seem to not really care too much about like how humanity goes, right? They're not that involved. And they only really get involved when there's like an explicit threat to themselves. So they get involved when Vasselheim is threatened because that's the center of their cultic worship. They get involved when their followers beg them finally to get involved. And even that's a little bit poetically stated. They get involved to destroy the rites of ascension only after their existence is threatened. They even, I think we can even think about these rites of ascension as kind of the nuclear option, right? They don't give those secrets to mortals, and they don't allow that secret to be given to mortals, because if they did, then maybe the betrayer gods would do the same, and then they all die, right? Like, once some mortals know, they spread that knowledge, and the entire pantheon is at risk. So it seems like the other gods are going to give the Raven Queen as much leniency and as much room as she wants, because she holds their fate literally in her hands. She is the god of fate, not only of mortal fate, but I would argue she is the proctor, she is the umpire, she is the referee of divine fate. The gods only exist because the Raven Queen allows them to exist. She could murder them just as easily as she pleases. And yet, she doesn't even give that ability to Vax. She doesn't give that ability to Vox, because it's not in her plans to. She could have. She chose not to. Yeah. A history book written by Pelor would probably look pretty different. Well, I mean, I'm sure that, like, in general, these seem to be scholarly attempts at accounts. In general, like scholarly historical attempts. And then I think all of the divine profiles are probably written by their cultic followers. That's at least the impression that I get. Actually, you know what's interesting? We actually do have a little bit of Pelor. Things that I think were written by Pelor followers, but not necessarily Pelor himself. But I do think that the Dawnfather's text is kind of interesting in that it is extremely poetic compared to a lot of the other profiles. The Dawnfather stands lord over sun and summer, his vigil encircling the ages as the keeper of time. Not one of his domains, but sure. Lord of agriculture and harbinger of the harvest. His followers commonly include farmers and most common folk. His priests welcome in lands all over. Supporter of the needy and destroyer of evil. The Dawnfather is often the patron of paladins and rangers who follow a similar creed. The Dawnfather is also known for his defeat of the chained oblivion and is revered by those who hunt aberrations. Tapestries of old match. Of old, match early text describing the Dawnfather as a patronly figure in silver and gold armor, his head a beacon of light and fire so bright that a face could rarely be seen within. Many statues in holy places treat the head as a brazier, lit with each dawn and extinguished with each dust. The Dawnfather's holy day is called High Summer and takes place on the 15th day of the 7th month. In Amman, the entire week is celebrated with gift-giving and feasting. Festivities begin on High Summer. Honestly, it's actually not as... I was thinking of a different person that was more poetic. This one actually isn't as poetic as I thought it was. Where was it? The Allhammer? I think it might have been. No, it's not the Allhammer either. There's one that talks about how they drove like 1,000 spears of light into the chained oblivion. And it resulted in him being chained. Is it in here? Where some say the knowing mistress. Oh, I might be. What am I thinking of? The chained oblivion still exists. Huh. Oh, here it is. The Crawling King. Sorry. The Dawnfather and the Everlight defeated the Crawling King during the calamity by drawing their nemesis above the ground. The Dawnfather pierced his body with 10,000 lances of sunlight, and the Everlight imprisoned him within her serene rays. The tears of suffering and rage the Crawling King shed burned through Exandria, and his faithful fled into these tunnels to escape their enemy's holy light. So that's my bad. The Crawling King is what had the poetic text, not the divine profiles for either of those. Yeah. So it wasn't the Chained Oblivion, it was the Crawling King. Anyways, I mean, there could also be a concept of mutually assured destruction. If the gods start killing betrayers, it's fair game the other way around. Well, that's what I'm kind of saying about, like, the nuclear option, right? I think there is an argument that is, like, why they don't do it anymore. Or they, like, don't, want to do it. Oh my god, there's a ton of hair on the floor. God, my dog just sheds everywhere. Blood is the domain of the god of death. Could be the idea of life's blood being needed to live, and part of death is giving up that life's blood. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. When it comes to... a history book written by I can't really square the Primes wanting the well-being of mortals and at the same time not wanting the Raven Queen to eliminate betrayers. She's immortal. Does she not have the empathy to do that? I think if I was getting into Raven Queen's mind, I think she feels like the type that assumes she's smarter than she's the smartest person in the room. And I think that she thinks she can outthink and outwork the betrayer gods just as they are, compared to if she elevated mortals to those positions. And I think that she also sees the risk to herself if she were to elevate mortals, right? Like, the more people that know the rites of ascension, at least the rites of ascension that can murder gods, the more at risk the Raven Queen is. Like, we don't have any evidence that she has a defense against the weapon that she herself created. Now, she might be creating a defense. We don't know. I could easily see that being one of her pet projects, is trying to create a defense against this so that she can just murder the rest of the gods and stand as the one true deity for the rest of time. Like, that seems to be broadly within her power now, but she might get jumped on too quickly. So she would need to, like, plan out the coup a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah. Raven Queen did one really impressive thing, is riding that high for the rest of eternity. Yeah. Okay. What else? Oh, I'll highlight something that, this was where, like, I was kind of uncertain if, up to this point, if the book was supposed to be, like, in fiction authorship, if it was supposed to be a lore book or whatever. I was a little bit uncertain until I read these bits about the Cinder King and the Chroma Conclave. This is when I was like, oh, okay, there's a bias here. There's absolutely a bias here. Because we have we have right here, with the martial forces of the capital city of Iman unleashed out of Fort Daxio, a terrible struggle erupted south of the Stormcrest Mountains, leaving many a good soldier reduced to bone and ember. It wasn't until a band of renowned adventurers entered the fray, led by Iman allied arcanist Allura Vysoren, that a lasting victory over the Cinder King was won, sealing the unstoppable worm within the elemental plane of fire forever. Or so they thought. This is wrong. Like, just explicitly, this is not how it happened. And we know this from Allura herself, that this is not how it happened. The way that Allura describes it is that they went and fought the Cinder King in the mountains and failed. They got slapped. Not the Raven Queen. The Cinder King won. And then they retreated, developed what would eventually become the Ember Seed, but they developed the Heartstone, and then had one of their number infiltrate Thordak's followers. Probably had to do some stuff to get in there, just saying. And then that follower convinced Thordak to take the Heartstone into himself. It was then able to be used as a soul anchor to seal him in the elemental plane of fire. The Heartstone is not mentioned. The fact that they had to have a follower infiltrate is not mentioned. This is just not how it happened. And the fact that it specifies Iman allied arcanist, right? Having to specify this is not just an arcanist, this is an Iman allied arcanist, lest you think poorly of them. Because again, we have like people in Vasselheim that have a general hesitancy about arcanists of all stripes, and this bit, the Cinder King and the Chroma Conclave, this is being written in modern day of Vox Machina, at least. Like, this text was written during the course of the campaign, right? This is not a historical text. This is a modern text. And so we have them specifying, hey, don't worry, Allura is Iman allied. She's on the side of good. Don't have to worry about her. And we're not going to include the little details, right? Especially, and like one thing that I hit really hard when I was reacting to this originally, that I want to make very clear. Again, I don't think this is purposeful manipulation. I don't think that the in-fiction author is purposefully manipulating these texts towards some end goal. They just have internal biases, and information is not objective. Every piece of information that they are going to get about an event is going to come through a lens of its own. You're going to get partial information. You're going to get contradictory information. You're going to get contested information. And if you're a scholar, you have to try and put all these pieces together in the way that makes the most sense. And so them highlighting, hey, this is an Iman allied arcanist, this is them trying to say, like Allura's a good guy. Despite my suspicions of her, so far within the story, she is a good guy. So displaying her as Iman allied, when you know that this book is going to be, probably circulated to places like Vasselheim, or this report is going to be circulated to places like Vasselheim, you do want to make it clear that she's a good guy. Because as far as you're concerned, she is. You don't want other people to, in your head, misunderstand what's going on. Even if within that attempt, you misunderstand what is going on, right? And so if they get, this information of like, okay, Allura and all them went to battle the worm, and they know that Vox Machina was eventually able to defeat Thordak, even when he was big and swollen and more powerful. Okay, well, like, why why wouldn't the adventurers have just won the first time? Right? Like, they're getting all, like, maybe they get this information, this report of like, oh, well, actually, they crafted like a heartstone. You're looking at that as a scholar and be like, a heartstone? Like the Age of Arcanum thing? Why would they do that? And you're a scholar, you're not a mage. You don't know how they sealed him in the elemental plane of fire, right? That's not your area of expertise. But you're looking at this and it's like, well, like, why would they have done that? Like, clearly he can get out with it, so it's probably just not relevant. And like, you know, maybe this like idea of like someone infiltrating his followers is actually an attempt to slander Allura's name. That's a very reasonable thing to think as a modern scholar that is getting contradictory, or in your head, contradictory information. Is like, oh man, maybe this is misinformation. I mean, her and the Arcana Panasophical are messing around with Age of Arcanum stuff. But you in your head know that she's a good guy. And good guys don't mess around with Age of Arcanum stuff in your head. So you just leave those parts of the reports out. Okay, if that report clearly isn't true because Allura's a good guy, well, she must have defeated him at the battle in the mountains, and then things just kind of got a little bit muddled from there. That must have been what happened. I think that, and to go even further with it, in the rest of the Chroma Conclave, it was during those 16 years that an old and unexpected ally of Thordax, a green dragon named Raishan, established communication from between the planes and plotted the Red Dragon's mysterious return. Mysteriously diseased in her later life, and seeking answers to this riddle, Raishan received a promise from Thordak. Thordak would cure her malaise should she discover how to break the Red Dragon's bindings and aid in conquering all of Tal'Dorei. Number one, her disease is not a mystery. Like, from a exterior perspective, if this was written by the hand of Matthew Mercer, her disease is not a mystery. We know exactly where her disease came from. But mentioning that her soul blight, her soul curse, came from a archpriestess of Melora, not a great look. Like, doing like soul magic as a worshiper of the prime gods, as a worshiper of the prime deities, not a great look. And using your own soul as fuel for that. I actually don't know if Raishan's soul is cursed or if it's just her body. But I know that the priestess of Melora used her own soul in order to enact the curse. And that's necromantic as hell. But again, a priestess of Melora would do that? No, this must be someone just making up some sort of rationale for where Raishan's disease came from. I say, as the in-fiction scholar, why would a priestess of Melora do that? A priestess of Melora can't even do that. Engage in necromancy? No, there's no way. This must be incorrect. We're just going to leave it up to mystery. We don't know what's going on here. Even though, again, we got that from the horse's mouth. That's what Raishan told us. And not only is that left out, but she just says Raishan finally unlocked the seal between the planes that bound Thordak and set him free, allowing the entire circle of dragons to assault him, blah, 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 blah. Again, didn't happen. She corrupted the soul anchor. We know that that's what happened. She says that she corrupted it, and that's how he was able to escape. She turned it into the Ember Seed. We know that. And then, later, when we hear tell of what he looks like, of Thordak the Cinder King, now swollen with elemental energy. Now, that's true. That is true. He was swollen with elemental energy. That was probably one of the two visible changes to him. The other being the giant ass gemstone in his chest, which is mentioned directly by every single person that they talk to from Iman during the occupation. They say he's got a big ass gem in his chest and he himself is very big. That's the description that we get. And it is completely absent. One of the two primary factors. In fact, the thing that was the tide shift during the battle when they broke the Ember Seed was when the tide really shifted in the battle. And it's completely neglected to be mentioned. Again, I would claim due to them wanting to keep Allura looking good, wanting to keep the Arcana Panasophical looking like they're on side, and not engaging or dabbling in secret magics. Right. I was going to say the book is right, but I'm thinking of how Allura said it happened in the show, and you're right. I'm saying... I guess at what point does considering condensing and simplification broach the realms of incorrect retelling? That is a question without an answer. That is a question without an answer that has to be considered in real life texts. Yeah, because there's an infinite amount of detail in the world around us. I say this all the time when I'm talking about describing locations or people or whatever in D&D, is there is an infinite amount of detail that you can describe as a GM. And it is important to consider what details you're including and what details you're excluding, right? You need to condense and simplify to a degree. When does that, dive into being untrue? It's hard to say. I think it's completely context dependent, The idea that an in-story author is unreliable because they don't want to get sued for libel slander is chef's kiss. I'm saying, man. I'm saying. Here's the thought. Maybe they had to edit stuff due to word count. I mean, maybe. It's the same question at what point does condensing and simplifying lean into untruth, right? These are important major events. The things that I'm talking about, the things that you could maybe include. Honestly, Raishan's disease, sure, pitch that. Ultimately, Raishan is the bad guy. We don't need to get it. And, the only source that we have for the fact that a Melora priestess cursed her is Raishan herself. An explicitly unreliable source of information. So, totally, pitch that. But I think it is telling that we include the fact that the Pyra Ashari was where the portal was opened to the elemental plane of fire, right? This did not need to be included. Raishan could have just opened the portal, right? We didn't need to include any of this information about her infiltrating the Pyra Ashari. So why do we include that information, which is only known to a few people, but we don't include the bit about Allura sending her agents to infiltrate Thordak's followers? And why do we not include the Heartstone there, right? We don't include the Heartstone here because we haven't established it already. Where would it come from, right? But we can't establish it earlier because it throws a lot of shade and suspicion onto Allura, right? We're okay, clearly, throwing shade and suspicion onto the Pyra Ashari. In this retelling of it, the Pyra Ashari look guilty. They look like they allowed Raishan to infiltrate them, never caught her, and she was just there for 5 years. This makes the Pyra look bad. And I mean, frankly, the Pyra do look bad. In the actual reality of the game, they look bad. They're not doing a very good job. But Allura also failed. She failed to destroy Thordak the right way, and she had to resort to some not so seeming or not so righteous tactics, we might say. And so why do they, if we're just concerned with word count, why include the fact that she infiltrated the Pyra? You might say, well, it's because it actually happened. Well, yeah, so is the Heartstone. The Heartstone is also a thing that actually happened, but we didn't include it. In fact, it's one of Thordak's 2 defining characteristics. 3, if you want to count the fact that he's red. These are these 3 main characteristics. And yet we cut one of them, but we keep the fact that she infiltrated the Pyra? And this isn't even a question of okay, well, people, in the Pyra would have known that this is how it happened, so they would have corrected her. Dude, everyone in the Arcana Panasophical probably knows that that's not how it went down with Allura. Anyone that was in her party, anyone that was at the battle knows that's not how it went down with Allura. Beyond that, everyone that was in occupied Iman knows that Thordak was not just swollen with elemental energy. He had a giant-ass gemstone in his chest. So, yes, there is word count to consider. But they are actively choosing to include things that they frankly didn't need to. If we're being really honest, if we really want to dive down into things they could have cut, they could have cut the entire Chroma Conclave. They could have just talked about Thordak and the Cinder King if they had wanted to. Maybe that would be too much, but if we're really worried about, about word count, why even include Brimscythe? The Iron Storm. He didn't do anything as a dragon. He was, in theory, part of the Chroma Conclave, but he never operated as a part of them. So why include him? Why include their titles if we're concerned about word count, right? Like Umbrasyl, Brimscythe, Vorugal. That cuts out a majority of the words in this sentence. And I don't mean to jump on that, that idea so hard. It's just, how do I say it? I think that we do need to really keep in mind, what things were cut and what things were condensed and simplified. But I also think that the decisions about what to cut, what to simplify, betray some of the underlying mindsets of the people writing this, right? The people that are writing this have a pro-Iman bias, and they don't have the same bias for the Pyra. If the Pyra wrote this, I'm sure it would look pretty different. Yeah. Yeah. So, there is word count to consider, no question. But I think it's a little bit more complicated. And that, I think, is most of it. There were some small things that were interesting. I think that this might just be a straight up typo, honestly. Trist was neither brilliant nor as charismatic as his grandfather. I think the grandfather in this case is supposed to be Warren, but Warren is his father. We never get an indication of who Warren Drassig's father is. So I think that might just be a typo. I don't actually think there's anything that interesting to pick out there. What else? Zan. I think that there's a big pro-Zan Tal'Dorei bias, right? Just this little bit towards the end, right? Tal'Dorei is not a name. It is a people, and you are the people of Tal'Dorei. I wish not to be your king, but a sovereign for the people. And if you accept me as such, the sovereign of Tal'Dorei, for the honor of Tal'Dorei. Acceptance speech of sovereign Zan Tal'Dorei to her people. Okay. What's the difference between a king and a sovereign? I don't know what the fuck the difference between those two things is. I think it's just, nomenclature. The difference is whatever you want it to be. And on top of that, it is so funny to try and play down your own role here when you're literally the country is being named after you. this isn't me saying that like Zan was a bad lady. Like I don't think there's probably anything wrong with Zan, but damn does the book bend over backwards to glaze her. Like it just like she is the best thing since sliced bread. And it even where does it say this? Yeah, right here. Society had all but collapsed during the war. The leaders of the verdant expanse assembled a council of trusted and proven minds, but the people were accustomed to a singular leader, a king. The council nominated the war hero Zan Taldore to take the seat, and she humbly accepted, but rejected the title of king or queen. Oh my god. Despite Zan's protest, the council unanimously agreed the realm should be renamed Taldore. It's like, okay, I'm sure that's how it all went down. Yeah, the council that seems to have like mostly managerial powers. Like, you know, it's not like monarchies don't have councils. Like, monarchies very much have councils. They have to, like, split up responsibility, dude. Like, saying, like, the people, we were so cool. Our ancestors were so based. And they wanted to do democracy, or at least oligarchy. But the people just weren't ready for it. They needed the figurehead. And it's like, okay, dude, sure they did. I'm sure. And they just so happened to name the country after that figurehead, despite that figurehead just not wanting it. They don't want it. They don't want the title. They don't want it to be named after them, but oh no, I guess they're powerless to stop them. Fucking give me a break, dude. Like, you know, I think Zan was probably a fine person, probably a good ruler. But the way that she is described is like, okay, come on. Like, it's very much like the people just don't know what they want and they need the hero of Zan to rule over them. I'm not your boss, I'm your employer. Propaganda, semantics. Yeah, exactly. There's I think the rise of Taldore is absolutely a piece of propaganda. Like we don't even need to say a propagandistic viewpoint. It just is propaganda. And you know, we all engage in propaganda. Like propaganda is just like state sponsored or, you know, that sort of media. Or like, you know, media that's meant to make you think a certain thing about a polity. This is propaganda. You know, how accurate is the propaganda? You know, who knows? We weren't there. But it was very funny to me reading that. I was like, okay, Zan. Oh, man. A king is a specific type of sovereign, typically a male monarch who rules a kingdom, while a sovereign refers to any supreme ruler, kings, queens, emperors, other types of rulers. And so there you go. It's like, you know, oh, I'm not your queen. I'm this much more broad terminology. Yeah. It's a little bit ridiculous. Welcome to Bing Bongistan. No, I'm not that important. Yeah. All this talk about authors and scholars made me realize that a reporter trying to get the next big scoop would make an amazing motivation backstory archetype for PC. Oh my god, yeah. Like an ambulance chaser type PC? That's super fun. That could be a fun, like, bard archetype or backstory. That'd be very, very fun. Yeah. I know it's hard to believe, but in the 1600s, the British overthrew their monarch and had a commoner rule, Lord Protector, and after him, we want a king again. I mean, I don't think it's impossible. I don't think any of this is impossible, but it seems a little convenient. It just seems a little convenient. But to be fair, it does happen. That's fair. So the only other thing that I want to highlight here that I think is really interesting, but I have no like real place to take the theory, is Guessar. Following the creation and subsequent raising of Exandria, the post-divergence world was now left to rise from the ashes and begin a new era. While every region has its own rebirth since the terrible destruction of the calamity, the continent that now bears the name of the setting shall remain the focus. Let it begin with the founding of Gwessar. So Gwessar is founded by the dwarves and the elves. So the dwarves and the elves are doing their thing in Taldore. And then, we keep going. This is all about elf and dwarf politics. And then, the dwarves and elves are long-lived people. And when they struggled to rebuild their civilizations, there were those among them who still remembered the world that was. The humans were not so fortunate. Their histories, written by warmongers in fading ink on waterlogged parchment and vellum, did not survive the years. Number one, how do we know that they were written by warmongers? If we don't have the histories, how do we know that they were written by warmongers? It's a weird characterization. Also, why are they waterlogged? Excuse me? What a random thing to specify. Or is it? Or is it a random thing to specify? Because several centuries after the Jagenstrike dwarfs began this period of renewal, a clan of humans braved the angry Osmint Sea and sailed to what is now Western Taldore from distant Isilra. Okay, so what's going on here? These people had the sea in their blood and sailed from island to island for generations. So when they talk about warmongers back in the day, they're either referring to people that were leading their society while they were the sea people, while they were nomadically going from island to island, right? They're either referring to those people or they're referring to Isilra and Vasselheim as warmongers. Or they are taking a characterization of human rulers from the future and post-applying it to the sea peoples, right? Because pretty much directly after this, actually on the same page, we get the Iron Rule of Drassig. The human colonies on Taldore almost immediately give way to the rule of Warren Drassig. So, when they describe their histories written by warmongers, are they referring to the people that led them when they were in the sea? Are they referring to people in Isilra, presumably still to this day? Or are they referring to the Drassig Empire, which did not exist yet? It's so interesting. It's almost like this is a cobbled collection of stories, all written by different people at different times, referring to different things. Just because we see them in some sort of order doesn't necessarily mean that it's the correct order. Or it doesn't necessarily mean that the people knew what they were talking about when they said these things. Oh, are they going crazy? All right, I'm almost done. I got the sea peoples, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll go into cries. Okay. So I found this very interesting because the waterlogged reference is essentially referencing the past, right? If they were the sea peoples, if they were going from island to island for generations, that makes total sense why their histories would be waterlogged. That's a very apt thing to say about them. But the warmongers makes no sense. It seems to be referring to a dynasty, to a family that didn't exist yet. Or maybe it did, right? This is the rise of humans colonies vexed the elves of Singorn. So they start, getting into beef. And then it says, as the first human civilization on this part of the world after the calamity, a handful of self-entitled noble houses arose in Iman and established law and structure. And then they get corrupt. It's a political war zone. And the greatest warrior of all of them was a loudmouth braggart and cunning oligarch oligarch named Warren Trassig. So is the implication that the line, the house, these royal families pre-existed them settling in Tal'Dorei? Or is it meant to refer to those things, but it's just getting some of its timeline confused? I don't know, but it's interesting. Bronze Age collapse in Tal'Dorei? I am definitely purposely evoking that. Yes. Also, it might be a Washington thing where Tal'Dorei was named after Zan died, a la Washington, D.C. and the Washington state. I mean, you know, maybe in reality, within this text, it says that despite Zan's protests, the council unanimously agreed the realm should be renamed Tal'Dorei. So it is implying that she was aware of the naming and actually actively protested it, but that it was done anyways. So it would imply that it was done, you know, before her death, but, you know, maybe. It's tough to say. It seems to me like an elven writer seeing all humans as savage/violent. I would agree. I think that's absolutely what's going on in this Gwessar segment. I could not agree more. Yeah. And also, the ruins of their first settlement still stand today, the port city of Onoa. And then from Onoa, they expanded outward. Yeah. I'm saying perhaps the naming timeline is a lie. It could be. It totally could be. I mean, that could be actively part of the propaganda. Zan might have died long before the country was renamed to Tal'Dorei, and it could have been renamed in her honor, like you're talking about with Washington, D.C. and the Washington state. Absolutely. Like, that seems honestly just, frankly, more likely to be the reality of what's going on. And so it's very interesting to me that the text itself seems to try to, simultaneously, discourage that, but it's also, it's saying that that's not actually what happened, but Zan still didn't want it named after her, which is a very interesting line to cut, through that, yeah. So, very, very interesting. And most of the drastic stuff is pretty straightforward. I don't think there were any of the godly stuff that, really, really stuck out to me. None of the race stuff, really, really stuck out to me. There was some interesting things in there, don't get me wrong. The factions and societies were kind of interesting. Definitely recommend reading them, especially with this kind of eye towards what might be, not totally correct. But those were the big hitters that I kind of, wanted to discuss. But I think that's where I'll call it probably. Let me just look at this just to make sure. I talked about the potential divine numerology. It would be it would take a while to display it as a succinct point. But I do think there's probably something special about the number 20, especially if you look through when most of the holy high days are. Most of the godly holy days. They are either on the 20th or 21st day of the month. The equinoxes, or sorry, not the equinoxes. The solstices are both on the 20th day. And the equinoxes, one of them is on the 20th day, one of them is on the 21st day, which I have kind of a theory about. But yeah, it's a lot to go through, and I don't think there's not a super interesting conclusion at the end of it. But I do think there is some amount of poetic and divine numerology going on within the text. So yeah. That is a theory. The acceptance speech could be totally apocryphal. There's a famous Churchill speech that he actually wrote after World War II that is often taught as preceding it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. According to the title, this is supposed to be about how the Raven Queen is a conniving bitch, but we haven't gotten there yet. Look, I mean, that's like most of what I've got for the Raven Queen. Like, there's honestly just not that much about her, and the sort of theory that I have is mostly based on like what she hasn't done. Like, she has all of these she has all of these abilities, and so her lack of use of them implies quite a lot about her. That I think you can just kind of theorize down forever about like the fact that she knows how to kill, not just imprison, but destroy a god. And she just hasn't used it since. I think there's a lot of interest there, combined with, I think, her shadiness about Vecna. Like, I will claim till the day I die, she should know more about Vecna than she lets on to Vax. And I think she just does know more. That she's just refusing to share. And so I am keeping my eyes on the Raven Queen. Because she seems to be the most powerful being in Exandria, point blank, period. Who knows what her actual goals are? Because not only is she able to be very involved in the material plane in a way that a lot of the other gods are not, but she is also seemingly has this like ace in her back pocket that she has refused to use so far. So it's very interesting, I think. But let me know what you guys think. Down in the comments, leave a comment. Tell me what you think about all of my reading about the text. Read it yourself. See if you notice any other maybe biases or potential contradictions, potential harmonizations. I'd love to hear all of that. And with that, I'm going to end this stream. Also, shout out, I haven't seen it, but Esper the Bard's video about the Raven Queen, apparently interesting. And I'm going to take a break for a second, go to the bathroom, get a drink, take the dogs out, and I'm going to end this stream. There's another stream, another premiere that is already scheduled and public. And if YouTube behaves itself, it should send you guys directly to that premiere page, and I should just be able to start the stream from there, and we'll do some Critical Eyes. So thank you for joining. Maybe I will see you at Critical Eyes here in a sec. Yeah. Bye-bye. See you in like 10 minutes.